I still remember the first morning he walked in. The classroom smelled like chalk and stale coffee, the kind of mix that clings to old schools. The bell hadn't even rung, yet he was already there, standing at the blackboard, coat buttoned to his throat, though the room was warm. No introduction, no roll call, just the squeak of chalk across slate. But here's the part that froze me. He wrote my name, not Alex from a roster, not a guess. My full name, Alexander Hale, spelled in that perfect curling script. And when I glanced at my classmates, I saw their names appearing too. One after another, neat and white, before he'd even looked at us. He turned then, pale face cutting sharp against the shadows, and smiled like he'd been waiting. That's when I realized he shouldn't have known us. The school said our regular teacher had gone on sudden leave. No details. Just, you'll have a substitute for a few weeks. I'd had subs before, frazzled, half-prepared, stumbling through lesson plans. This one was different. He didn't ask questions. He didn't shuffle papers. He already knew what we were supposed to learn. He filled the board before we even opened our notebooks, and his writing had this eerie symmetry, like the letters weren't written but etched. "Copy it down," he said softly, though his voice carried like a thread pulled tight. So we copied. The first unease hit me when I noticed his eyes. They didn't settle. He'd look at someone, blink slow, then move on. But not like checking a classroom. It was cataloging. Like he was memorizing how our mouths twitched, how we scratched at our skin, how we shifted in our seats. I told myself I was imagining it. But then Emma, the girl beside me, hissed under her breath. She held out her wrist. There it was, faint white lines, chalk pale against her skin. Words, the exact same answer he'd just written on the board. And when I pulled up my sleeve, I swear to you, I had them too. The next day I came in early, hoping to catch him off guard. The room was empty, desks lined up neat, dust motes hanging in the weak morning light. For a moment, I thought maybe he wouldn't show. Maybe we have a normie teacher back. Then I heard it. Chalk, squeak, pause, squeak. But the board was blank. I froze in the doorway. The sound kept coming, steady, deliberate, like someone was writing in air I couldn't see. My stomach knotted. He stepped from the corner, too suddenly, like he'd been waiting for me to listen before revealing himself. "Alexander," he said, voice low. "You're early." No smile this time, just my name, hanging in the air like a command. By the third day, no one joked in class anymore. We just sat there, pencils moving, watching the board. Sometimes the chalk moved before he touched it, like invisible fingers guided it. The answers etched themselves into our skin before he finished writing. Some of the kids tried to laugh it off, tugging their sleeves down, whispering nervously about magic markers. But I couldn't laugh, because the marks weren't fading. At night, under the dim yellow of my desk lamp, I could still see them. New words, fresh answers, questions we hadn't been asked yet. And one evening, God, I wish I'd never looked, I noticed a sentence curling along my forearm, written in his perfect hand. "Don't tell anyone." That was when I realized this wasn't teaching. It was something else, something he was putting inside us. And I wasn't sure it would ever come out. The fourth day was the one that broke me. I walked into class and everyone was silent. Not just quiet, silent. The kind of silence that hums in your ears, pressing against your skull. He was at the board again, chalk scratching slow. But he wasn't writing equations. He was writing sentences. Our sentences. Things we had thought. Things we had whispered. Things no one could have known. Emma wishes her father would leave. Oh, David dreams of drowning at 2:17 a.m. My throat dried up. The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls were listening. I wanted to stand, to shout, to tell him to stop. But when I looked down, the words were already etching across my arms, burning cold as they appeared. And when I turned to Emma, I saw tears rolling down her cheeks, because her skin told her secret before her mouth ever could. I tried to leave. I swear I did. My chair scraped loud against the tile as I shoved back, muttering something about the bathroom. He didn't stop me. He only watched. The hallway was empty, humming with that faint fluorescent buzz. I walked fast, then ran, my footsteps echoing. But when I pushed open the side door, the air outside smelled wrong. Too thick, too chalky, as if the whole world had been dusted in powder. And there, on the brick wall, were words scrawled in the same perfect script. Alexander returns. My stomach turned. I spun and stumbled back down the corridor. Every door I passed had writing crawling over it. Names of kids in my class, answers, numbers, private thoughts that couldn't be real but were. And when I burst back into the classroom, the others were still sitting, eyes wide, like dolls propped in their chairs. None of them had moved. Only he smiled. That night, I couldn't sleep. The marks on my arms glowed faint in the moonlight, as if written beneath the skin. I scrubbed at them until my skin went raw, but they didn't fade. They just sank deeper, as though they belonged there. Around midnight, I heard chalk again. Not in the classroom, in my room. A dry squeak right against my wall. My chest locked tight. I reached for the lamp, and in that half second of light, I saw it. Words spreading across the plaster above my bed, line by line. You are learning. You belong to me. I shut off the light, but the sound didn't stop. Tell me, if you were me, would you have stayed in that room? Or would you have done what I did? Press the pillow to your ears, pretend the noise was nothing, and pray for dawn. The next day, half the class was missing. No excuses, no explanation. Just empty desks, their names already rubbed from the board. He didn't call roll. He didn't mention them. He just kept writing, his pale hands steady, his coat buttoned tight. And for the first time, I noticed his fingers weren't smudged with chalk. They were clean, perfectly clean. The dust on the board didn't touch him. That's when the major mystery cracked open in my mind. He wasn't teaching us. He was using us. Each word we copied, each mark carved into our skin, was some kind of transfer. And the more we wrote, the emptier I felt inside. I don't remember the last lesson clearly. Only fragments. The smell of chalk so thick I could taste it. The sound of his voice, softer now, almost affectionate. He wrote one final line on the board, turned, and waited as the words spread down our arms like fire, searing through veins. Erase yourselves. Kids began to slump forward, pencils dropping, breath leaving in slow rattles. I fought it. I swear I did. but my body felt like it belonged to someone else. The room swam. My hands went numb, and the last thing I saw before darkness washed over me was his smile. Thin, sharp, patient. I woke in the nurse's office. They told me I'd fainted, that the substitute had already left, that no one by his name was ever registered with the district. They said I'd imagined it, but when I pulled up my sleeve, the words were still there. Fainter now, buried deep like scars. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the chalk again, squeaking just behind my walls, writing lessons I can't escape. And when I check my skin in the mirror, new words are waiting. The last one appeared only this morning. Class resumes soon. The second story begins in a place where silence feels unnatural. You. Ever feel like a memory slipped out of your head when you weren't looking? That's how it started, just a hollow space where something should have been. I'm telling you this because I don't think it's just me. It was all of us, and it all began with that homework. I was 17, back row of room 204, head pressed to the cool desk because the heater never worked. Our teacher had been out for weeks. Flu, they said. A replacement showed up one gray Monday, tall and thin as a ruler, wearing a suit that smelled faintly of mildew and paper. He didn't introduce himself. He just passed out stapled packets, one to each desk, his fingers cold when they brushed mine. The cover page had no title, no subject, just a single line at the top. Complete before sleep. That should have been a joke, but no one laughed. At first, it felt like busy work. The questions weren't about math or history, nothing like that. They asked things like, what do you remember about the first sound you ever heard? And write the face of your oldest friend. We all shrugged and started writing, pencils scratching like insects. I remember glancing at Emma 2 rows ahead. Her lips moved soundlessly as she wrote, eyes glazed, like she was reciting something she couldn't quite hear. By the time the bell rang, every page of mine was filled. I don't even recall moving my hand that much, but the words were there in my handwriting. Whole paragraphs, details I didn't even know I remembered. Nursery wallpaper, a lullaby, the taste of milk on a metal spoon. And when I turned the packet over, at the very bottom of the last page, there was another line. Do not forget. But I didn't remember writing it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the assignment. It sat on my desk, paper edges curling, almost humming. I swear I could hear faint scratching, like a pencil dragging across paper, even though the room was silent. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, but my brain kept tugging at loose threads. What did I eat for lunch last Tuesday? I couldn't recall. What street did my grandmother live on? Blank. My own middle name. I knew it once. Now it hung out of reach. The homework hadn't helped me remember. It had hollowed me out. Around midnight, I checked the packet again. Some answers weren't mine anymore, my handwriting, but the words weren't what I wrote. One page just said over and over, "Who are you?" I shoved it into my backpack and tried not to look at it again. But even zipped inside, it felt alive. The next morning, the classroom reeked of iron and dust. Kids shuffled in, pale and tired. No one joked, no one whispered. Every packet sat neatly on every desk, waiting, though none of us had put them there. David leaned over to me, whispering like someone might hear. Do you remember your brother's face? I blinked. I don't have a brother. His lips trembled. Yeah, you do. And for a second, something in me agreed. A flicker, dark hair, a laugh I almost recognized, but it slid away. Before I could hold it, the teacher stepped in, coat buttoned, eyes flat as slate. "Pass forward your work," he said. We did, and as the packets left our hands, a cold certainty washed over me. Each one carried something we weren't getting back. When I looked down at my empty desk, I realized I couldn't remember my mother's voice, and that was just the beginning. The 5th day was when the homework finally turned cool. We shuffled into class, half asleep, half empty, our packets returned to us. The papers looked chewed at the edges, ink bled like veins, but somehow still legible. New questions waited on the last page. Always the last page. This time, they weren't about memories. They were about identity. What are you? Who still remembers you? If we erased your name, would you still exist? My pencil trembled in my hand. But the strangest thing? My fingers didn't want to stop. It was like something else was guiding them, dragging out pieces of me I never consented to give. When the bell rang, I felt hollow again, like someone had scooped out part of my chest with a ladle. Walking home, my reflection startled me. Not in a horror movie way, but in the subtle, bone-deep wrongness of it. The boy staring back from the convenience store window looked like me, but his eyes didn't spark with anything familiar. They were dull, distant, waiting. I pressed a hand to the glass. It stayed cold, even against the warmth of my palm. And for just a second, the reflection's mouth moved separately from mine. It whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but I knew the word, forget. Would you have run if you were me? Or would you keep walking like nothing happened, praying no one else saw? By the next morning, kids were missing. Desks sat empty, names unspoken. The teacher didn't ask where they'd gone. None of us did. It was like the holes they left in the room were natural, expected. But here's the thing. I couldn't remember their faces, not even blurry outlines, just blank spaces in my head where friends used to be. When I whispered to Emma, asking if she noticed, she stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then she leaned close, voice trembling. What if we're the ones disappearing? Piece by piece. Maybe we're already gone. And then she shoved her sleeve up to show me something carved into her arm. Not ink, not pen, but ridged like bitten skin. Assignment complete. That night, I tried to fight it. I tore the packet apart, shredded it, stuffed it in the trash can behind my house. My hands shook, sweat running cold down my back. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would break the chain. But when I came back inside, it was already waiting on my desk again, perfectly stapled, fresh questions at the bottom. Where did you think you could hide? I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at it until the lines blurred. Every so often, I'd hear the faintest tearing sound, like teeth sinking into paper. The last day came without warning. The classroom smelled of wet stone, the lights too dim, buzzing faintly like flies. The teacher didn't bother with instructions. He just stood there while we flicked to the final page. Write down who you were before school began. My chest caved in. My mind was blank. I tried. I swear I tried, but no words came. Just silence, pressing hard against my temples. Around me, kids scribbled frantic, pencils scratching like claws. Some cried, some laughed hollowly, but none of them stopped. And then the packets moved. The pages curled, edges rising, paper folding in jagged lines. Mouths formed where there should have been margins. Rows of sharp, wet teeth, chewing, swallowing the words we'd written. One by one, my classmates slumped in their chairs, heads heavy, eyes glassy. Like the homework had eaten everything that made them human. I ran. I didn't hand mine in. I bolted before the thing on my desk could open wider, before its pages could bite. But here's the part I can't shake. Every night since, new sheets appear on my desk. They crawl out of the dark like they know where I sleep. And I'm forgetting more every day. My neighbor's name, my father's laugh, the smell of home. Just yesterday, I looked in the mirror and couldn't remember my own birthday. This morning, a single question waited on the page, written in that sharp, hungry script. Are you ready to be graded? And my skin crawls because I think I already failed. This is where the third story begins and where comfort ends. I should have known something was wrong the moment I smelled the perfume. Parent-teacher night is usually predictable. Stale coffee in styrofoam cups, faint disinfectant on the desks, the low murmur of awkward introductions. But that night, when the first parents filed in, the room filled with a heavy floral scent, old-fashioned. My mother used to wear it when I was a kid. I froze, chalk in my hand, watching a tall woman drift toward me in heels. She smiled like she knew me. It's been a while, she said. Her eyes, green, pale, unblinking, didn't leave mine. I wasn't her child's teacher. I wasn't her anything. Yet my stomach sank because the perfume wasn't just similar. It was exact. And when she tilted her head, I'll swear, she whispered my name. The gym had been set up for the event. Rows of desks for each teacher, folding chairs for parents. The place buzzed with chatter, but when I listened closely, something was off. It wasn't real conversation, just phrases, repeated too evenly. She's doing so well. We're proud of him. Yes, of course. Like scripts passed back and forth. I rubbed at my temple, telling myself I was tired, imagining things. But then I noticed the faces. Parents I recognized, sort of. Shapes I'd seen around town, yet wrong in ways I couldn't pin down. A familiar nose on a stranger's face. A smile too wide for someone I thought I knew. When one of them laughed, sharp and sudden, every head in the gym snapped toward me at once. Not at my table, at me. Their eyes lingered too long, and then, perfectly in unison, they turned back. By the time Emma's mother sat down across from me, my hands were damp. She looked right at first. Hair tied back, pearl earrings, that polite half smile. But when I began reading the notes on Emma's progress, she leaned forward, close, whispering under the hum of voices. She doesn't sleep, you know. She hears things. You should tell her not to listen. My throat dried. I'm sorry, what? The woman didn't blink. Her lips moved, soundless this time. For a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard. But then she opened her palm on the desk. Words were scrawled across her skin in thick black pen. Do not send her home. She closed her hand, smiled again, and asked me about grades as if nothing had happened. I tried to keep moving, tried to keep the routine alive. Parent after parent sat, nodded, left. But each one felt wronger than the last. A man with the face of my old basketball coach sat across from me, insisting he was Lily's dad. A woman with the same mole as my aunt asked about report cards, but called me son under her breath. My head spun. The gym was too hot, the lights buzzing harshly overhead. I couldn't catch my breath. I stood, muttered about needing water, and stepped out into the hall. But the hallway wasn't empty. It was lined with them. Parents who hadn't been called yet, or maybe parents who didn't belong at all, just standing shoulder to shoulder, silent. And when I tried to pass, they shifted, parting slightly, like they'd been waiting for me. I don't know why, but something told me if I followed that path, I wouldn't be coming back. So I turned, and there, at the far end of the hall, stood someone I recognized. Immediately, it was my father, dead 10 years. I froze. No one here should know who I really am. Not like that. I never give out my first name, not even to students. Yet a father in a gray suit mouthed it again, perfectly, like he practiced. Eli. My knees almost buckled. My throat burned with a sudden dryness. I backed up, and the chalk squealed under my shoe. The sound seemed to wake them. Their heads all tilted in unison toward me. The gray-suited man stepped forward. "We've been waiting for you," he said. But his lips didn't move. The voice came from his chest, a hollow vibration that made my ribs ache. My hand fumbled for the doorknob, but it wouldn't turn. It was locked from the outside. Behind me, the parents kept moving closer, chairs scraping like nails down a coffin lid. Then the lights flickered, just once, and the walls looked wrong. Mrs. Hall finally reached me. Her perfume was too sweet, like flowers left in stagnant water. She leaned close, too close, and whispered, "You don't remember us, do you?" I forced a laugh, said I must have mistaken her for someone else. But she shook her head, and the man beside her grinned, revealing teeth that were wrong. Not sharp, not monstrous. Just too many. They waited, expectant, as if I should say something back. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Around the room, the other parents stopped pretending to talk. All of them were watching me now. Their eyes shined too wet in the light. Their smiles stretched just a little too far. The air pressed heavy on my chest. And then someone whispered my name. Not Mr. Reeves, my first name, from a parent who shouldn't know it. The posters on the walls were different. My bulletin board of homework reminders had been replaced with yellowing. Photographs. Me. At different ages. Some pictures I'd never seen before. Taken in rooms I didn't recognize. My skin crawled as I staggered back. The parents laughed softly, a sound too layered, like a choir caught in a throat. "You're ours," the woman in the floral dress whispered. She wasn't Mrs. Hall anymore. Her face was collapsing inward, eyes sinking like wet clay. I banged on the door, shouting for help, but no sound carried beyond the wood. The windows showed no parking lot, no night sky, just endless rows of desks stretching out into a dim horizon. Desks filled with children whose faces I couldn't see. I turned back, desperate, and found them all standing much closer now, their arms reaching, stretching longer than they should. I don't remember falling. One moment, I was clawing at the door. The next, I was on the floor, my cheek pressed against tile that felt soft like skin. Hands pinned me, dozens of them, cool and damp. Their whispers burrowed in my ears, memories I'd forgotten, things I'd done, names I buried. I fought, but they didn't hurt me. They were pulling something out. A warmth drained from my chest, like breath I didn't know I was holding. I screamed until my throat bled, but the room swallowed every sound. When I opened my eyes again, the parents were gone. The desks, the photos, the wrong walls. Gone. Just my empty classroom, quiet as ever. Only one thing had changed. On my desk, in perfect cursive, was a note I didn't write. See you next parent-teacher night, Eli. The fourth story doesn't just haunt, it follows. I'll never forget the smell of that classroom. Stale paper, floor wax, and the faint chemical bite of dry erase markers. It clung to me even when I walked out. I was 17, just another faceless student in a row of chipped desks, and if I'd known what was coming, I'd have run and never looked back, but I didn't. I stayed. I stayed because of a test. Not a normal test. No, this one, it shifted beneath my pen like a living thing. And the first time I realized the questions weren't the same as when I started, it was already too late. Tell me, if you saw words rearranging themselves on paper, would you keep writing? Or would you leave everything you thought you knew? Behind, the day it began was cloudy, the kind of gray that made the fluorescent lights hum louder. Mr. Keller handed out sheets of paper, one to each of us, and told us this was a memory assessment. His voice was casual, but there was something in the way his eyes lingered on me. Too long, too curious. The questions looked simple at first. What's your favorite meal? Where were you born? Stuff you'd answer without thinking. I scribbled them down fast, but when I glanced back, one question had changed. The words were the same handwriting, the same line spacing, but the letters weren't what I remembered. It asked, "Who raised you?" I froze. The thing is, I'd already answered. I swear to you, I'd written Mom and Dad. Now it was gone, replaced by something that made my stomach turn. And in that moment, I couldn't remember what their faces looked like. I laughed under my breath, pretending I'd misread it, but my hands shook. The next question wasn't harmless anymore. It asked, "What year is it?" I blinked, confused. I knew the answer, of course, but when I wrote it down, the numbers didn't look familiar. My head throbbed like I'd slammed it against the desk. Around me, other kids scratched their pens without hesitation. Not one of them looked alarmed. Not one of them noticed the way the paper seemed to ripple faintly, like heat rising from asphalt. I wanted to ask, God, I wanted to ask if they saw it too, but the room was so quiet, I thought even breathing wrong would give me away. And then the boy in front of me, a kid named Harris, dropped his pen. When he bent down to pick it up, I swear I saw his desk paper flicker, turning black for an instant, like burned film. By then, I couldn't ignore it. My pulse hammered so hard I thought I fainted. Keller paced between the rows, his shoes whispering against the tile. Every time he passed, the questions seemed to warp, twisting to match the scratch of my pen. What is your earliest memory? It asked next. My earliest memory was a red plastic tricycle, but when I tried to picture it, the image slid away, leaving only a blank hallway in my head. I wrote something anyway, just to fill the void. But as the ink bled across the paper, a name surfaced in my mind. A name I'd never known before. Eleanor. My throat closed. Who the hell was Eleanor? The pen slipped in my sweaty hand, and when I looked down again, The paper wasn't white anymore. It was gray, damp-looking, like it had been pulled from a flooded basement. And Keller was standing right over me, watching with the faintest smile. Keller's shadow stretched over my desk like a stain. He didn't say a word, just tilted his head, waiting. I forced myself to look back at the page, but the questions had shifted again. My handwriting was still there, slanted, messy, but the words beside it weren't mine. "Describe Eleanor," it demanded. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream that I didn't know anyone by that name, but when I opened my mouth, another memory slid in where my real ones used to be. A voice humming, a hand brushing my hair. A lullaby I had no business remembering. I dropped the pen and Keller's shoe tapped once on the tile, sharp and deliberate, like a warning. When I picked the pen back up, the paper seemed to pulse beneath it, and against my will, I began to write. Each line I wrote felt like it dug something out of me and buried it. The sound of my father's laugh, the smell of pancakes on Saturday mornings, gone, erased. In their place, Eleanor's voice, Eleanor's face, Eleanor's cold fingers lacing with mine in a place I didn't recognize. The more I wrote, the less I remembered of myself. I wanted to stop. I swear I tried. But my hand kept moving, like the pen was pulling me instead of the other way around. Around me, the other students scratched away, their faces blank, docile. I couldn't tell if they were fighting it or if they'd already given in. My throat burned. I wanted to ask, who the hell is Eleanor? Why does she feel closer to me than anyone I've ever known? But before I could speak, Keller said softly, "Good, keep going." His voice didn't sound like a teacher's anymore. It sounded like a caretaker, coaxing a child deeper into sleep. Something inside me broke when I reached the bottom of the page. I'd written a memory of Eleanor's house, a sagging Victorian with black shutters and a yard full of brittle grass. The details were sharp, realer than my actual life. And when I looked up, my classroom was gone. The walls around me had yellowed wallpaper. A single window rattled against a winter draft. The smell of chalk and wax was replaced with dust and old wood. I could still see Keller, though standing in the corner. His suit didn't fit this place, and yet his smile told me he belonged. My classmates were there too, but not in desks. They sat in wooden chairs lined against the wall, their faces slack, their papers balanced on their knees. And in the center of the room, a woman stepped forward. Her hair was long, gray, her smile both tender and wrong. "Do you remember me now?" she whispered. And God help me, I did. I remember the way her hand felt on my cheek. I remember her voice shaping my name like it was hers to give. I remember the first night she called me her son. But that's the problem. I don't know if any of it is real. Every time I try to think of my parents, the memory collapses, replaced by her face. Eleanor. I tried to run that night, but the door opened into another test, another desk, another page. Each one strips away more of me. I'm not even sure what year it is anymore. Maybe I'm still 17. Maybe I've been here decades. Keller still watches. Eleanor still hums. And I'm writing this down for you because I need you to understand. If you ever sit down in front of a paper that asks questions it shouldn't, don't answer. Not one. Tear it up. Burn it. Because once you start, you'll never stop. You'll write until there's nothing left of you at all. And when that happens, you'll belong to her too. This is where the fifth story begins. and where comfort ends. She never blinked. That's the first thing you noticed about Mrs. Dwyer. In a school where teachers droned on, half asleep themselves, she stood in front of the blackboard like a statue, her chalk hand moving, but her eyes fixed, always fixed, on us. We joked about it at first. Some kids even tried to make her crack by staring back until their eyes watered. Nobody lasted longer than a few seconds. And the weirdest part? Even when you looked away, you still felt her watching. Like the burn of a camera flash that lingers when you close your eyes. Only hers didn't fade. If you've ever woken up in the middle of the night, convinced someone was in your room, you know the feeling. That was every second of her class. And then the dreams began. At first, they were harmless, mundane. I'd dream I was in my desk, same classroom, same fluorescent flicker, except it was empty. She'd be at the front, waiting. Her eyes locked on mine, unblinking. She wouldn't speak, not with her mouth anyway. But I'd wake up with whole sentences echoing in my head. Facts I'd never studied, equations I'd never seen. When the tests came, I aced them without trying. That should have been a good thing. Only every student had the same experience. We'd sit in silence, pale and twitchy, trading glances we couldn't explain. And when someone tried to talk about the dreams, the words jammed in their throat. I saw it happen. One kid, Jeremy, turned purple trying to force it out. He looked like he was choking on smoke. After that, nobody tried again. We just carried her lessons inside us, like a disease we couldn't describe. It didn't take long before the dreams changed. They weren't about history or math anymore. They were about things I can barely put into words. Patterns of sound that weren't sound. Shapes that didn't stay still. Instructions whispered in a language my ears didn't know, but my bones seemed to recognize. I'd wake up sweating, my pillow damp, my throat raw from whispering in my sleep. I started writing the symbols down in the margins of my notebooks, not even realizing I was doing it until someone pointed it out. The lines curved like vines, sharp as teeth at the edges. When I tried to erase them, the paper tore, but the marks stayed, faintly pressed into the fibers. And when Mrs. Dwyer collected homework, she always paused at mine just a fraction longer, like she was checking my progress, like she already knew. Tell me, would you have stayed in that class? Because I should have walked out the first time I saw her eyes in my sleep. One night, I jolted awake to the sound of chalk, not scratching against a board, chalk dragging across wood. My bedroom wall. I sat up, heart pounding, and there she was. Not in the flesh, at least I don't think so, but her shadow stretched tall across my ceiling. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with light, but with attention. She was teaching me something, forcing it into me. I couldn't look away, couldn't close my own eyes. The lesson wasn't numbers this time. It was a phrase, a warning, or maybe an order. I can't tell you the words. My tongue locks every time I try. But I understood it. God help me, I understood it. And when I woke the next morning, the marks were still there, faint white scratches across my wall. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just a dream anymore, and it wasn't just happening to me. I tried to skip her class the next day, told the office I was sick, ducked into the bathroom until the bell rang. But when I pushed open the door to leave, I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was in her classroom. Same cracked linoleum, same faint lemon cleaner smell. She stood at the board, back to me, writing symbols that twisted as soon as I tried to read them. My stomach turned. I blinked hard, but my eyes burned, watering. She turned around, and for the first time since I'd known her, she smiled. Her lips moved, but the sound was inside my skull. "Sit," she said. Not a suggestion, a command. My legs carried me to a desk, even as my brain screamed to run. The seat was cold. The desktop felt damp, as though someone had been crying over it. She handed me a piece of paper, thin as skin, warm to the touch, and a stub of chalk instead of a pen. "Write what you've learned," she said, without moving her mouth. I don't know how long I wrote. Time didn't work in that room. I filled the page with symbols I'd never seen, but knew by heart. Each mark felt like it drained something out of me. Memories, maybe, or pieces of my voice. The air smelled like old stone, damp and sweet, like a cave far underground. My fingers cramped. My eyes ached from not blinking. She hovered at my shoulder, and I could feel her eyes on me like heat. When I finished, she leaned down close enough for me to smell her breath, metallic like coins, and whispered, "Now you can teach." I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was at the front of the room, facing my classmates. Their eyes were wide, unblinking, waiting. My throat worked, but no sound came. A rush of words spilled out, not mine, nothing human, and their faces went slack. Something had passed from me to them, and Mrs. Dwyer nodded, satisfied. When I came to, I was back in my bed. Morning sunlight on the wall, my alarm blaring. For a heartbeat, I thought it had been a nightmare. But my bedroom wall was covered in chalk symbols, every inch of it. My hands were white with dust. My eyes burned and burned, and when I went to the mirror, I realized I hadn't blinked once since waking, not even when I tried. I stayed home that day, locked the door, closed the curtains. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw hers. Not just in dreams now. She's behind my eyelids, waiting. At night, I hear desks creak in the dark and whispering voices practicing lessons in my room. Sometimes the voices sound like my friends from class. Sometimes they sound like me. I'm telling you this because I can feel her pushing at the edges of my mind, trying to make me stop. She wants her lessons to spread. She uses us to teach when she can't be there herself. Maybe you've already seen her in your sleep, the woman who never blinks. If you have, it's too late. But if you haven't, for God's sake, never meet her eyes. Don't even look at pictures of her, because once she sees you, she never forgets. And when her eyes are in your dreams, you'll wake up teaching lessons you can't repeat aloud, just like me. The sixth story begins with a warning no one listened to. The windows in that classroom didn't show the schoolyard. They showed something else. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was a trick of light. Maybe the glass warped from age. But the first morning I noticed, I remember staring past my own reflection and realizing the playground was gone. In its place was a street I'd never seen before. Burned out cars, smoke curling low, a sky the color of rust. And the strangest part, a boy who looked exactly like me was standing in the wreckage, staring back through the glass. He lifted his hand. So did I. And then the bell rang, and the vision blinked out like a channel changing. Would you have looked again? Because I did. And that's when the disappearances started. The teacher, Miss Halloway, never addressed it. She drew diagrams on the board, droned through the lesson, never once acknowledging the shifting world outside. But every kid in the class knew. I could see it in the way they stole glances at the windows, trying to catch it in motion. One day, it would show a city choked in vines. Another day, a coastline swallowed by black waves. Sometimes it was quieter things, streets flooded with golden light, or a future where the school itself was a crumbling ruin. And always, there were versions of us out there, walking, waiting, watching. I tried whispering to my friend Carter about it once, but his mouth clamped shut, like the words themselves betrayed him. He just shook his head hard, face pale, and stared straight ahead. Then kids began vanishing. The first was Emily, the quiet girl 2 rows up. She leaned too close to the window during math, her nose practically touching the glass. The moment Miss Holloway turned to erase the board, Emily wasn't in her seat anymore. The chair was still rocking, the notebook still open, but she was gone. Nobody screamed. Nobody said a word. It was like our voices had been stolen. When I glanced at the glass, I swear I saw her, out there, in a classroom that wasn't ours, her face slack and eyes wide. She tried to mouth something, but the pain rippled, and then she was lost. That night I couldn't sleep, because every time I closed my eyes, I felt her breath against the back of my neck. By the third disappearance, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. The windows weren't showing reflections or tricks of the mind. They were doors. Thin, fragile doors to other timelines, other futures. And someone was pulling us through. The last kid who vanished was Carter. He'd stopped looking days before, kept his eyes nailed to his desk, but it didn't matter. During a pop quiz, the light outside changed, went dim and green like pond water. I saw his face twist, his knuckles white as he gripped his pencil. Then his seat was empty. His test paper fluttered to the floor, but Carter wasn't there to pick it up. My hands shook so bad I nearly dropped my own pencil. And when I dared one last glance at the window, I saw something that turned my stomach cold. Carter wasn't trapped out there. He was walking freely, smiling, and the version of him in that world looked back at me like he'd been waiting for me to join. I didn't go back the next day. I sat on the curb outside the school, stomach in knots, watching the brick walls shimmer in the heat. The building looked normal from out here, kids laughing, buses idling, but the windows on the second floor flickered like TV screens between channels. I could feel them pulling at me, even from the street. My name kept echoing in my head, in Carter's voice, stretched and wrong. I told myself I wouldn't set foot inside. But then the bell rang, and I blinked, and I was already at my desk, chalk dust on my hands, the smell of lemon cleaner sharp in my nose. Miss Holloway stood at the front of the room, writing something that wasn't words on the board. Her eyes glowed faintly, like the reflection of passing headlights. "Today," she said, her voice soft but carrying, "we'll learn where you belong." The windows were wide open to a place I didn't recognize. The playground was gone. In its place stood a field of black snow under a violet sky. Children who looked like my classmates were out there, moving slowly, their footsteps not leaving any prints. The paper she handed out wasn't lined anymore. It was thin and translucent, faintly warm. The question at the top wasn't a question at all. It was my name, written over and over, each version a little different, as if from another hand. My fingers trembled, I tried not to look, but my gaze slid to the window anyway. This time, the other version of me wasn't just watching. He was closer, his hand pressed flat against the glass. His smile was small and patient, like he knew a secret. "You're late," Miss Holloway said, without looking at me. "They've been waiting." I dropped the paper, but it clung to my skin like static. My heart hammered, my mouth opened to speak, but no sound came out. Just a faint hiss, like air escaping. My classmates stared blankly, pens scratching, their bodies still, but their reflections in the glass moving on their own. I tried to stand, but the floor felt soft, like walking on wet sand. Each step sank deeper. If you were me, I thought, would you run? Would you jump through and hope you end up somewhere better? The boy on the other side tilted his head, beckoning. His eyes were my eyes. Behind him, Emily stood, her hands clasped, lips moving soundlessly. Carter, too, smiling like he'd been let in on the punchline of some cosmic joke. Ms. Holloway's voice was closer now, though she hadn't moved. "Every window is a lesson. Every lesson is a choice. Some of you choose sooner than others." Her hand touched my shoulder, cold like the glass in winter. "You've seen enough. It's time." The last thing I remember is pressing my palm to the window, feeling it give, warm and soft like skin. The world beyond smelled like rain on metal and tasted like copper on my tongue. I felt 100 fingers brushing mine from the other side. Then the classroom dropped away. I'm writing this now from a place that isn't quite my world. The sky is violet here, and the snow is black, and the windows look inward instead of out. When I press my face to the glass, I see my old classroom, my empty desk, and another version of me sitting there, staring at the window like it's nothing but sunlight and playgrounds. If you're in a classroom with windows that show more than they should, don't look too long. Don't answer when someone who looks like you beckons, because once you touch the glass, it's not a window anymore. It's a door, and it only opens one way. What follows is the 7th story, and it refuses to be forgotten. I still remember the smell of old paper that day, the chalk dust in the air, the squeak of shoes in the hall. It was report card day, and every kid in my class was restless, either dreading or daydreaming about what their parents would say. Me? I wasn't worried. I was a decent student, nothing special. Mostly B's, a couple of A's if I was lucky. But when Miss Holloway handed me the envelope, her hand lingered on mine. Her eyes didn't blink, not once, and I swear her lips twitched like she wanted to smile but wasn't allowed to. The paper felt too heavy in my hand, like it was wet or thicker than it should have been. And when I opened it, I realized it wasn't grading my schoolwork at all. What it graded hadn't even happened yet. At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. The categories weren't math, science, or English. They were things like honesty, loyalty, fear, mercy, and next to each, a letter grade in perfect red ink. The words seemed to pulse on the page, darker, fresher than the lines my teacher had written on the chalkboard. One section read, "Betrayal A." My heart stuttered. I hadn't betrayed anyone. I hadn't done anything to deserve that. But the paper didn't care what I thought. It was written as if it had already happened. I slid it back into the envelope, hands shaking. But the ink bled through, faint shapes pressing up like veins under skin. I remember glancing up, hoping someone else noticed. But the rest of the class just stared down at their reports with blank, slack faces. That's when I realized I was the only one reacting. I couldn't stop myself. I whispered to Emily, the girl next to me, "What did you get?" She turned her head so slowly it made my stomach flip, like a puppet's head on stiff wires. Her eyes looked glassy, unfocused, but her lips moved just enough for me to hear, "Future's written, don't fight it." Then she turned back to her paper, her pencil scratching softly even though there was nothing left to write. My chest went cold. I wanted to run, to rip the thing up and toss it out. But the grades were burned into my mind now. Cowardice, C-. Violence, B. Survival, incomplete. The last one made my throat tighten. Incomplete? Did that mean I wouldn't live long enough to finish? I thought about crumpling the whole thing, but the paper felt warm, alive almost, like it was waiting for me to do exactly that. By the time the bell rang, I couldn't breathe right. My report card was still clutched in my hand, even though I'd tried to shove it deep into my bag. Every step down the hall felt like walking through molasses. Kids brushing past me, but never meeting my eyes. It was like they already knew. Outside, the world looked sharper, too sharp. Sunlight glared off the windows. Every sound echoed too long, like the world itself was stretched thin. I looked again at the final line at the bottom of the report. It hadn't been there before. The ink was still wet, smearing under my thumb. "Next bell, you will fail, Mercy." And when I looked up, someone was waiting at the end of the street. Someone who looked just like me. He was standing under the lamppost, even though it was the middle of the day. My double. Same jacket, same haircut, same slouch in the shoulders. But his smile was wrong. It stretched too wide, like the skin of his face hadn't been cut for it. And he wasn't holding a book bag. He was holding a folded slip of paper, just like mine. I should have run. But I froze, every nerve in me thrumming like a wire. I wanted to scream, to tell someone, but people walked past without a glance. Cars drove by, headlights burning in daylight, but no one saw him. Just me. He lifted the paper and pointed at it. Then he mouthed the word. Mercy. The report card in my own bag grew hot enough to sting. I forced my legs to move. Stumbled down side streets, cut through alleys, just trying to lose him. My lungs burned, the paper scraping against my ribs as if it were trying to claw free from inside my backpack. Every corner I turned, I expected him there. But when I dared to stop, dared to unzip my bag, the envelope was already half open, and the grades had changed. Lies. B. Mercy F. My stomach dropped. I hadn't done anything yet. Unless running away had counted. Unless he was waiting for me to choose. The sky overhead darkened in a way no weather ever should, like someone dimmed the sun with a dial. And from behind me came the scrape of shoes dragging on pavement. I didn't want to turn. I knew who it would be. He was closer now. His face wasn't even pretending anymore. It sagged, the eyes too dark, the mouth carved into that grotesque smile. But it wasn't just his face that made me stumble back. He was holding someone by the collar. A kid, a little boy I didn't recognize, maybe 8 or 9. The boy's eyes were wide, silently begging, throat locked. My double shoved him forward into my arms. The paper burned hotter in my bag. I knew what it wanted. Mercy. My hands shook as I looked at the boy, then back at the shadow version of me. His head tilted, waiting, expecting, and I realized the grade wasn't about school. It was about this. This moment. I tried to pull the kid behind me, tried to protect him, but my double lunged. His hand clamped around my wrist, icy and brittle, like grabbing a dead branch in winter. The boy's scream ripped through me. For a heartbeat, I almost let go, almost shoved him forward, just to save myself. My report card flared in my mind's eye, the red ink etching itself deeper. Mercy, F. And then it happened. My double didn't strike me. He struck the boy, one clean, inhuman motion. The child's body collapsed like paper crumpling in on itself. Gone. Just gone. The thing wearing my face leaned close. Its breath smelled like scorched paper. See? Written already. I don't remember running home, but somehow I made it. The envelope was gone from my bag, but the report card had replaced every paper in my desk drawer. No matter how many times I burned it, shredded it, threw it away, it always came back. Sometimes the categories change. Sometimes the grades get worse. Regret, weakness, cowardice, and the worst part, it's never finished. The bottom always leaves one line blank, waiting for what's next. Last night, it updated again. Ink fresh, the letters carved deep enough to cut through the page. Confession ongoing, which means this: me telling you is already written. And if you're listening, maybe yours has already been graded too.